First, I'm going to make it quit echoing. All right. Well, excited to have you guys be here. As you can see on the screen, we got all kinds of backdrop issue problems. So I've wheeled a TV in here so that the one person who joined me, the rest of you guys that chickened out driving here. So I'm just kidding. So we're going to go through and be talking about CMA today and hitting on how to do a CMA. And so if you remember, we started this 12-hour new agent course. So these 6 classes that we're doing are part of the 12-hour new agent so that you can get the 12-hour new agent credit, CE. If you remember that when we started it, I said that I was already teaching most of this stuff, but then what happened was the division of real estate said, or excuse me, I had an agent that went to a class that said that what the division was having them teach was exactly the same thing I had been teaching essentially. And so that's why I decided to do it this way. And as a result of that, why I'm reminding you this is there's a couple of things that we have to talk about in order to fulfill what the division wants you guys to have discussed. So I'm going to start off with that so we can knock it out of the way. And maybe that's a poor way of saying it, but so that we can make sure we cover it. And then from there, what we're going to do is we're going to get into and we're going to talk about basically the process of doing a CMA. So here's where I want to start with on this. In terms of doing a CMA, the process of doing a CMA, there are probably as many ways to do it as there are agents that are out there doing it. And I remember as a new agent, when I decided that I wanted to do real estate and I wanted to now learn how to do a CMA, I remember going and talking to someone, and I don't remember who it was, but I remember asking them, hey, teach me how to do a CMA. And they sat down and walked me through the process. And for me, I have an analytical side to me. And so because of that, I wanted the process of doing a CMA to be just like you plug in the information and the computer spits out the answer. Well, that is not the way it works. And that was a big struggle for me for a long time to learn that. And so you're going to hear me say a bunch of times today, doing a CMA is an art, it is not a science. And so if you will think of doing a CMA as being an art, not a science, it will help you understand the process better, at least for me. Because I still want it to be a science. I still want it to be a scenario that you go, okay, they live in this zip code, and you put in the number of the square footage, the beds, the baths, the how many car garage, the lot size, and then it spits out a price. So even recognize that even an appraiser doing an appraisal is still an art, it is not a science. So what should happen, and the thing that I remember from the person that taught me to do CMAs, the thing that I remember them saying is that however people go about doing the CMA, even though it may be different approaches, we should come up to being within a reasonable amount of money of each other. But that's not always going to be the case. So that's what we're going to start with today. Now, before I do that though, and I can see people throwing names in, which is awesome. So as a reminder, put in first and last name. And if you have not given me your license number from one of the 6 classes, or I mean, we haven't done 6 yet. This one I think is 4. I think this is number 4 class or 3. I don't know. 3. Yeah. Swen's telling me it's 3. So if you have not given me your license in the last 3 classes, make sure you put it in there in the chat box so that I can give you credit for this class. And that way, essentially, I don't have to track down your license number is really what I'm saying. Okay. Well, because we have most everyone that is in class today is on Zoom, I'm going to either call on you guys a lot or Swen's going to get up and leave because he's sick of answering all the questions. So I need you guys to be interactive with me today. Okay. So here's where I'm going to start with though, so with that background of what I just shared with you guys about it being an art and not a science, I want to share with you this real quick here on the screen to show you what I mean by that. So I've labeled this as perception versus reality, but basically this is what the house looks like to the seller. So hopefully you guys can see this well enough. But when the seller looks at their house, this is what they see. When the buyer looks at the house, now keep in mind, this is the same house, okay? So the buyer looks at this house and this is what they see. When the lender looks at the house, or maybe I probably should even call it the home inspector. When the home inspector looks at the house, they look at the house and assume this is what that house looks like. This is what the appraiser thinks the house looks like, but this is what the tax assessor sees when they look at your house. So just here's the point being, just it is an art. It is not a science of what we're going to go through and we're going to talk about. So now here's where I need you guys to get interactive with me for a minute. So here's the first question for you. What is the difference between an appraisal and a CMA? So CMA, comparative market analysis, something like that, however you want to call it. But what is the difference between a CMA and an appraisal? So what would you say is the difference between them?
I would say that the appraisal is written in stone, whereas the CMA is just sort of a guideline for us agents for pricing the home.
Okay, so when you say written in stone, tell me more what you mean by that.
So if I run a CMA and I say, your property may sell for 300,000, but ultimately the appraiser might come in and say, sorry, it's only worth 250. His or her word is going to uphold over with the numbers that I pulled. I can show him, I can appeal it. However, they're the professional, and what they decide is what they decide ultimately.
Okay, good. So now as you guys give me answers, I'm gonna play with it a little bit. So I want to point out something that Anna said there is that they're the professional. Does that mean we're not?
That's exactly what I was saying. We should be as well.
We need to have an appraisal for bank financing, right? Where the CMA is not. I mean, you couldn't use a CMA for financing purposes.
Okay, good. Yeah, which I know that's what you meant, Anna, right? Of course, but I play with it a little bit. You'll see why I play with it here in just a second. Why the reason I bring that up in just a minute. So what Chad said is right on. Is the purpose of an appraisal being done is for actually the lender. And so the lender is relying on that appraisal to be done. So good. What other thoughts do you have about that? The difference between an appraisal or a CMA? Or have we covered it well enough?
I think CMA we compare to how the home compares to similar homes that have sold, but I feel like the appraiser actually goes and determines every little difference, I guess you could say, in what the house looks like inside and what it's made of and things like that.
Okay, good. Yeah, thanks, Ron. Yeah, so to some extent, the appraiser gets into more of the fine detail of it. I would agree. Good. Any other thoughts?
Seems like appraisers typically go back a little further than if we were just to do a CMA. I'd only go back maybe 2-3 months, whereas an appraiser might go back 6 or 9.
Okay, good. Yeah, so okay, good. So typically the banks want them to do it less than that, but without them, they don't have to justify if they go back only, or they can go back 6 months without having to justify why they did it. Okay, good. All right, so here's the next question for you then. In terms of that, which one is more, let me think what word I want to use. I don't know if I want to say accurate. Which one is more accurate, or which one is more reliable? Which one would you say is more trustworthy? What are your thoughts on that? Which one do you think is better? Maybe that's another word. So any of those combinations, better, trustworthy, accurate, depending.
Appraisal.
You think the appraisal.
The appraisal because it affects lending.
Okay, so appraisal because it affects lending. What do you say, Swen?
Because they're going into the fine details, but a lot of times, like, we use CMAs to give clients an idea of value, right?
Yep.
And so sometimes the appraisers, let's say we get the value, we get a listing and somebody offers that, the appraiser might find ways to get there though. So they also might, I don't know.
Okay, good. No, I love. Hope, did you guys on Zoom? Did you hear that? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so keeping that in mind, if I can just change this up here for a second. Okay, so with that in mind, which there is not a right answer to this as I'm asking you guys this. The main thing we want to just talk about is what is the difference between an appraisal and a CMA. And the appraisal is done, the biggest thing I want you guys to make sure you understand, the appraisal is done for the bank. It is done for the, now, could somebody paying cash go get an appraisal done and now it's done for the buyer? Yes, of course. But most of the time, if an appraisal is being done, it is being done on behalf of the bank. And the purpose of it is the bank is saying, okay, we're going to be giving money for this property. We want to make sure that in the event they don't make payments and we have to go foreclose on it, that we can get our money back out of the property. Is really where it's coming from, right? Is that's ultimately what's going on. But I'm going to give you my personal opinion. Now, and again, this is just personal opinion, doesn't mean that I'm right. But I have a belief that we as agents, so Anna at the beginning, I gave a hard time because she said they're the professional. And I said, well, aren't we professional? So to some extent, the reason I did that is because I actually believe that we do a better job at valuing a property than what an appraiser does. Now, here's why I say that. So again, you can disagree with me and I'm fine with that. In fact, I've had times when I brought that up with appraisers in the class where I've had an actual appraiser who has a real estate license as well. And they will always argue this with me for sure. But I personally think that we do a better job. Here's why I believe that is when an appraiser goes out to do the appraisal, and Swen kind of brought this up, but they already have a target in mind. Meaning they already know here's the price that the contract is for, and they're now going out to say, is that justifiable essentially? Versus when you and I go out to do a CMA on it, what do we have as a quote unquote target that we're trying to hit? Seller wants a certain amount. Yeah, the only thing, so which still, just so you guys know, I now have 3 people in class. I don't know if you saw them walk in, so I'm excited. But yeah, what Ed said is, do you go by Ed or Edward? Ed. Okay. I just, in my spreadsheet, it's Edward, but I was like, I better verify before I say it. So, although, you know what, there's actually just full side note. Do we have any California people on? I don't think so as I look at the names. Okay, that's just fine. But there's an agent in California that was down there that I kept saying her name wrong, and I kept, and this wasn't recently, this was before Zoom, but because I've had it since we've done Zoom too. So you guys that were on with Nagna, even if I said that right. But this agent down there, and I finally just created basically the nickname. So like taking Edward to go to Ed for her. I don't remember what her, I can't going blank on her name right now. But anyway, I said, is it okay if I call you that? And she said, no. But I just kept messing. I finally just said, I don't care if you like it or not. That's what I'm calling you. So anyway, all right. So don't be offended, I guess. So we'll probably, right? Okay. So what do we have? Ed said what we have as a target is the seller kind of saying, this is what I think my house is worth. But a lot of times they're just saying, well, I don't know. What do you think? You know, even though they have a number in mind, they may be just saying, well, you tell me what, how much do you think my house would sell for? So that's the first piece of it. Here's the other reason why. And Kyle brought it up when he was talking about it is typically an appraiser, when they are doing an appraisal on a property, they're looking only at what has happened in the past. So think of it that way. Their job is to go look at it and say, had this home been for sale a month ago or 2 months ago or 3 months ago or potentially 6 months ago, what would have it sold for because of what the past tells it? So think of it as they're driving, if you think about the Disney movie Cars, and you had Mater on there that he said he was the best backwards driver that there was. Like, think of it, I think of it that way, as appraisers are trying to drive a car down And I'm not trying to beat up on appraisers, so don't hear that, like, even though it sounds like it. But they're kind of driving down the street in reverse, using the rear view mirror as the way to go down the road. Does that make sense? Like, that's how I like to think of it. Now, again, they're necessary. I'm not trying to beat up on appraisers. Do we have anybody that is a licensed appraiser on here? No.
Hey, Russ, I have a story.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, a lot of these newer agents haven't seen a declining market, but when we were headed into the Great Recession, agents knew what was happening in the market week by week, and it can shift in 2 weeks, and appraisers are looking at that 6-month historical data. So when I did a listing appointment and explained to the trustees of the estate why I would price it the way I wanted to price it, they said, well, we're going to get an appraisal. And so my price was $275,000. The appraisal came in at $350,000. So they listed with the agent who had listed at $350,000. That home sat on the market with all those carrying costs of vacant property for 1 year. They ended up selling it at $242,000. So that's why, we're in the market. We know what's happening and we know the subtleties, and we're not looking at that long-term historical data. So that helps us, I think, in valuing.
Perfect. Yes, that's exactly right. Go ahead.
And it strikes me that lenders are going to be ultra conservative, because one of the things that they do not do is lose money, right?
Yeah, they don't want to, right?
They never really want that to happen, period. And so they play extra safe. We're a little more aggressive with the trend that we see going on.
Yeah, good. And exactly right. And I want to share one quick story too that Ginger reminded me of. Is I had a client that during that same time I walked in, and this was a neighbor from growing up, but my mom ended up moving, and they had ended up moving, the neighbors, but the kids knew that I was an agent, and the parents had passed away, so the kids called me saying, will you help us sell the property? Went in to list the property, same thing that Ginger said. They had an appraisal that was done for $410,000, and I went in saying, yeah, that was probably the case 3, 4, 5 months ago, however long it was that he had done it. I said, but in today's market, here's your price. And of course, they did what most sellers and most of us probably would have said is, well, let's at least just start there. What's it going to hurt to start there? Well, I told her the same thing Ginger said. What it's going to hurt to start there is the prices are declining, and the longer we don't get it sold, the less you're going to get. So I recommended they should list it at $385,000. She, of course, said, let's start it at $410,000. We started at $410,000. 3 weeks later, I went back to her and I said, okay, it's not $385,000 anymore. The price is probably now $370,000. And she said, okay. And guess what she wanted to reduce the price to? $385,000. So we put it to $385,000. And I had already said, now you're probably $370,000. We go 3 weeks, I go back out and I said, okay, I think we're down now probably to $365,000 is probably where we should be. No, I take that at $360,000. We should go to $360,000. She said, okay, let's go down to $375,000. And I said, but so then at that point is when I stopped her and I said, let me show you what's happening. And I pulled out to show from when we listed the property, here's what they were selling for. Then 3 weeks later, this is what they sold for. And so if this trend continues and we go to 375, what you're looking at is probably 335 by the time you get this all right. Luckily, she got it and said, okay, let's go to 350. We put it at 350. So we went below where I thought the market was, went to 350, and we ended up selling it for, I don't remember, somewhere close to that anyway. So yeah, that's my point when I say I think we do a better job. And again, I'm not trying to degrade them. They're necessary. I think they do a good job for what they're there for. But I also think even in today's current market, they're looking at what's happened, not what is currently happening. Now, we did have Troy Campbell from an appraisal management company come in a few weeks ago, or I don't know how long it's been, maybe over a month. And he taught a class, and part of what he said, which I had never thought of this before, but part of what he said, in a market like we're in today, part of the appraiser's job is to keep that market from just skyrocketing. And so, yes, they are going to kind of put a lid on things, even though us as agents will look at it from the standpoint of saying, well, hold on, like I just got 35 offers and they're all $20,000, $30,000 above list price, yet you're not appraising it for that price. How could that be? Because what determines the value is what a seller's willing to sell and a buyer's willing to buy, right? That's what should determine that. And if there's cash involved, that is what's going to decide the value of the home. But without it, then part of what these appraisers are going to do, which if you stop and think about it, is probably as frustrating as it can be when you're the listing agent on it. If you think of the overall market as a whole, it probably is a good thing that they're trying to slow down how quickly it's going, because that if it goes up too fast, just like what the stock market did, it goes up too fast, it's also going to correct pretty far down as well, which is what happened back in 2008. All right. I think I've covered what I needed to say about.
Hey, Russ, this is Carla, but it really says Lee on the participants. But just had this happen this weekend. We lost a bid and it was listed at 400. Found out we lost it at 438. Investor, Chinese guy from California. And, you know, the advantage of doing and having a CMA versus an appraisal was you can do that CMA like right now. Think big, move fast, but you want to maybe not necessarily. The advantage is you can slow down your clients. You know, they just didn't feel comfortable, you know, going that high. But I ran a very quick CMA and found out that 2 houses on the very same street sold within 90 days. One just less than a block away, and not one of them was over 400. So, you know, just the questioning, of course, there's no way that's going to appraise for 438. So they just kind of didn't feel good going. It was a very eye-opening to do a quick CMA at the time to know where you're at.
Yeah, good. Thank you. All right, so here's what we're going to do then. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through and we're going to do a CMA. So I'm going to take you guys through the process that I follow. Now keep in mind what I was saying to you guys, which, oh, holy cow. I have pulled up right here Salt Lake County actives. We just went under 400 active properties in Salt Lake County, 399. That is so scary. Anyway, all right. So let me clear that out so that we don't have any panic. Okay. So what we're going to do is I'm going to just walk you through the process of how I do it. Now, keep in mind, there are multiple ways, and if depending on who is here teaching this class, and we could have multiples of people, including people that are probably on the Zoom right now, that could come in and say, let me show you how I do a CMA. And we're all going to have little variances of how we go about it. But like I said, at the end of the day, hopefully what ends up happening is that we end up in essentially the same general spot. So I'm just going to walk you through the process that I go through as I do it. And then if you have questions and stuff along the way, we'll talk about it. So here's what we're going to do is we're going to, oh, I wasn't sharing my screen, so you guys probably couldn't see when I showed the 399 properties for sale. Okay, so here's what we're going to do is I'm going to assume, we're going to just, you guys want the light on or no? It's easier to see. Is it better there? Okay.
Do you need a little more?
The screen? Is that good? Okay, so here's what we're going to do is I'm going to just walk you through the process of how I go through doing it. And again, doesn't mean that this is the end all be all, this is how you have to do it. And in fact, I'm going to reiterate again, doing a CMA is an art, not a science. And so I wanted to be able to have it plug in there. In fact, there are programs, including on our MLS, that are up here under this CMA and create new CMA that you can go through and you can create a CMA where it'll make the adjustments just like an appraisal would make adjustments. Now they fine-tuned that recently to where you have to go in and say what you think it's worth, which good and bad on that, I think, because the challenge though is here's my concern with it. My concern with using the report, the CMA report on here, this create CMA thing, I will do that if I'm trying to do something really fast. If I want a really fast one, I will do it that way. But the reason I have a hard time with it is because what I've seen is what Ed brought up is the seller says they want X for their house. And then, and in today's market, maybe that isn't as big of a deal, but the seller says they want X amount of dollars for their home. And I've watched agents go and manipulate the numbers to make the CMA say close to what the seller wants because they want to get the listing. And so for me personally, I don't like it for that. But again, this is where I'm coming from in terms of saying it's an art, not a science. It doesn't mean that I'm right in what I'm saying, showing to you guys. I'm just showing you how I do it. So what we're going to do is this. We are going to assume that we've just set an appointment with a seller to list their home or to go do a CMA for them on their home. And I'm going to just walk you through how I would go about doing it, okay? So for me personally, this is the first thing that I would do. So as soon as I get off the phone from setting that appointment, I generally am going to jump on the MLS, and the first thing that I like to do, and again, this is just personal preference, but is I love to go in here and come down to the house address. So this is, we're going to do this. This was my first, the property we're going to do today was my first home. And I'm probably going to regret that I ever sold this house after we do this, but we're going to do it that way. So I'm going to just put in, I would put in the house number. This is how I like to do it, is I put in the house number of the property. Well, it brought up 60 matches. Well, I don't necessarily want to look at 60. So I'm going to see if I can narrow it down by saying the property's in Salt Lake County. Well, that gets it to 32. That's good enough for me. So then from there, I'm just going to hit view results. And what I'm doing now is I'm just looking for the address over here of the property. So I'm just going to scroll through these 30-ish properties here. And here it is. So you can see it'll show up a few times. So here's Walnut View Circle. There's Walnut View Circle. Here's a Walnut View Circle. So I'm just going to, it doesn't really matter which one you grab. For me, I go through and just find the first one that I see. Then I'm going to click on the MLS number, which brings it up. From here, if you click on history, I can now get to the most recent one. So you can see I clicked on this one here, which was the middle one. This is when I sold the property down here. This is that, then they tried to sell it, and then here's the last time it was on the MLS. It was 2012. So I'm going to click on this one to bring this one so that we can see just the most recent. So what I'm typically going to be looking for in this is I'm trying to see, okay, what is the information about this property? What can I learn about the property? So for me, part of what I will do as well, let me go back to the history there, is I like to just look at the history to see what has gone on with the property. So you can see if we look at this, that the property listed in 2000. So now I had this home built in, it was either 93, 94, something like that. We'll see it here in a second. But when we sold it, my wife and I sold it in 2000. And so you can see that I put it on the market on August 18th, and then on September 13th, for whatever reason, I dropped the price from $139.9 to $139, which, like, I did a major price reduction there of $900. But for whatever reason, it worked because 2 days later, it went under contract and then sold at the end of September. So, okay, fine. Then from there, you can see it came back on the market in 2008 for $231,000. Didn't work though. So in March, they dropped it to $195. That still didn't work. So this is the time where what Ginger had brought up is, you know, back in this time of the market, prices were tumbling. But this one, they were also in financial trouble, the people who bought the property. And so you can see that they then went from 195 to 159, and then it went off market and expired. Okay. Then in 2011, it went back on the market, went from active to an active with a time clause, went off market. It finally, then they were doing cash offers, and it finally sold. So I'm going to just come back here. So what we're going to assume, so it sold for 125. So now notice that they tried selling it in 2008 for 231, which potentially in 2007, maybe that would have worked. But anyway. So what we're going to do is we're going to assume this. So let's assume that we've gotten a call from this seller that has said, hey, we want to sell our property, and we'll just, for the sake of, since we know, let's say that they told us, yeah, we bought it back in 2012. They bought it for 125,000. We're going to assume they went through and did repairs and fixed it up and all that. Okay, so let's assume on a scale of 1 to 10, even though when we look at these pictures, it's not, but let's just say that on a scale of 1 to 10, they bought it looking like this, which by the way, this color scheme and stuff was not me.
Sure.
Yeah, the same with this. This was carpet, not linoleum.
That was our first house plan.
This was yours? You bought it?
No, the plan was exactly ours. The
All right.
house plan.
And the other reason, this wasn't from when I owned it is because my wife would never let me leave the toilet seat up. That would have never gone. All right, I'm kidding. So, okay, so let's just looking through this, you can see here's what the property looks like. But we're going to assume that since they bought it, they have gone through and put in, let's say they went through and did all new cabinets, new carpet, new paint. Okay, so it's been brought up to date is what our assumption is. So based on that, we want to now see what this property is worth. So from here's typically what I would do. Typically, I'm going to print this out. So I would come up here and print it. And the reason I print it is just so that I have it. And a lot of times I will take that printout when I go to look at the house to make adjustments or changes or whatever if there needs to be. But for the sake, yeah, go ahead.
You're saying you're gonna assume some things about the property. Isn't that really dangerous? I mean, isn't that something that's gonna maybe come back?
Yeah, so the only reason I'm saying that we're gonna assume is because we are not all gonna go look at this house right now. So what I'm saying is let's assume that when we get out there, that it has been all updated. Okay, does that make sense? So you're right, traditionally, I wouldn't assume I would go look at the house.
Yeah.
But for the sake of our class today, so let me rephrase it. Let's assume we already went and looked at the house and it's updated.
Okay.
Is that better?
Yeah, I just got stuck on the assume because I know.
Yeah, no.
Usually that comes back to
haunt you. Yeah, no. Just for the sake of class, I'm saying, let's assume we've already been out there. It's all been updated.
Yeah,
New carpet, new paint.
Good.
And it's on a scale of 1 to 10, it's probably a 9.
Now we know what
Yep,
we need to
we know what we're doing, okay? All right, so just for the sake of what we're doing here, kind of help me remember some of this, although I should remember most of it. It's about 1,800 square feet, built in 93, 0.19 of an acre. And that's probably good. All right, so I would typically have printed this off, okay? So now this is where I'm saying, so now we go out to the house, we get out there, we see that it's updated, we've taken a few notes on the paper. We're now going to do our CMA on the property, okay? So now I'm going to walk you through the process of this. Now, but before I do, let's first talk about when an appraiser is going to do it, what are they looking for in terms of so we're going to kick back to appraisal for a second. What are they looking for in doing comparables? I mean, we already, Kyle brought up in the last 6 months, so good. So time frame's got to be within the last 6 months. Typically, they want it 90 days out or less, but what other things is an appraiser looking for?
Like how similar the homes is, 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, same square footage.
Okay, good. So square footage, the style, ideally bedrooms, baths. Okay, good. What else?
Proximity.
Equipment,
Okay, updates, good.
Condition,
Say that again.
condition,
Condition, good. Somebody else said something before that too.
Proximity.
Oh, proximity. Okay, good. So yeah, so think of it that way. They're typically same kind of a thing. If it's more than a mile away, they're going to have to justify. But they also, an appraiser typically wants to have at least one property from within the neighborhood. Now, if there's not, there's not. But ideally, an underwriter from the mortgage company wants to see at least one property from within the neighborhood if they can. Okay, so it's important to keep all this stuff in mind because even though me saying to you guys, I think we do a better job of valuing a property than an appraiser does, we still have to deal with the appraisals and we still are gonna, so I still want to kind of, as I go through this, ideally try to get at least one comparable from the neighborhood because I know that's what the appraiser is gonna do. So I kind of want to have that in play. All right, so I'm going to approach this as kind of the same type of a thing. So I'm going to clear that out. And for me, I usually am going to start doing this the way that an appraiser would do it because I want to see what is the number that an appraiser is probably going to kind of come up with as well as we go through the process. So let me show you how I'm going to do that. So
Russ, can I ask a quick question, just really fast?
Okay.
Can you populate the form? The populate form and put in the MLS number, and then wouldn't it populate a lot of stuff for us or not?
I could do that. If I came up here and clicked on CMA and did the create CMA, it's got populate form here where I could put in the MLS number. But for me, and again, this is back to where I say it's an art, not a science, and there are tons of people who do it that way, and I think that's totally fine. For me personally, I don't like to do it because I find that I end up just having to tweak the stuff anyway. But again, just personal preference. So
Okay.
yeah, great question. All right, so I'm going to come back here to this. I put in that I want to see sold properties only, which as soon as you put that in on our MLS, it automatically defaults it to go back 1 year. So it's looking back 1 year for sold properties. Then from there, I want to use some of the same type of criteria that we talked about that they would use as well. But before we do that, I'm going to jump to the map here. And I usually just start with doing a radius search here. So I'm going to say that I want it to be, and again,
2 miles.
to some extent, again, where this, I'm going to keep saying this, you're going to get sick of me saying it. It's an art, not a science. And so for me, a lot of times, think about, and I am not artistic. You guys have seen me write and draw, so you know that I'm not. But think of it as kind of when an artist is working on it. My wife has an aunt who sells these art pieces that, like, I'm not kidding. It looks like she just got paint and splotched it all over the place. And then she sells these things, and she'll post pictures on Facebook and stuff. And I look at it and I'm like I could do that. Like, there's nothing in my mind. There's nothing artistic, and she'll even comment sometimes about how, man, I put a lot of time into this one. And I'm like, it looks like you just like sneezed on a piece of paper. Is what. But here's my point. For an artist, they take a look at it and kind of stare at a blank piece of canvas for a while to figure out what they want to do and how they're going to create it. Or I like to use the example of my father-in-law's got this pine tree that he cut down, and I have a brother-in-law that my father-in-law said, hey, would you come and sculpt that into like a bear? And so he's got this cut down pine tree stump that's now this bear that what my brother-in-law does is he stands and stares at it for a minute and sees like what it needs to be before he goes to work on it. Well, same kind of a thing as I think about doing a CMA that way. So for me, as a general rule though, I will usually just automatically put in a 1 mile radius of the property. But this is where I say this is an art, not a science, is that sometimes just knowing an area, I might look at it and go, I don't need to do a whole mile. I'm going to do only a half of a mile. Or knowing an area and the style of property, you may develop to where you go, I got to do a 2 mile radius to be able to find any comps on it. So part of how you're going to develop this, so for you newer agents that are maybe like going, oh, great, I was coming to this class thinking I'm going to know how to do CMAs. The best way you're going to get good at doing CMAs is by doing CMAs. That's how you're going to learn to what this is. So for me, a lot of times, some of this stuff is just a gut feel. So for me though, I typically,
Russ?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Can you just go back 1 step and show me how you put in that radius search? I didn't see.
Yeah. So let me clear out of here.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
And then set radius location. And then you could actually put in the MLS number, which I should have written down, but I didn't, so that's okay. All right, so I'm going to click set criteria here. Make sure that it always does take you to the area you're wanting to go to, because I've seen sometimes where if you type in the address, like it takes you to a totally different state even. So if you don't put in, like I've just put in the house number in the street and it'll take me to a different state, but looks like this is good. Okay.
Ross?
Yes.
A question. Sorry, I couldn't find that little blue button on the right up in upper corner. So I don't know.
Did you click on this right here, this radius tool
Oh,
first?
okay. Hold on a second. Sorry, I just, kind of lost. So that's why just want to make sure that I know exactly what to go after that.
You're good. Yeah,
Okay.
on this
It's gonna be that one. Oh, okay, found it. Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. Thanks.
Good. Okay, so you'll notice here that it's saying too many listings to display, so it's not showing up. So this is part of why when I said to you, I generally will start with a mile, but just kind of knowing the area and what we've put in the last year, that's going to be too many. But all we have put in so far, I'm going to hide the map. All we put in is solds within that 1 mile radius, and has been 351. Well, we want to narrow it down, obviously. So.
Will you put a style rambler?
Yep, that's what I'm going to do. Is the next thing I'm going to do is go and let's say style right here. Now this one is a tri-level, multi-level. Now again, back to I told you you're going to get sick of hearing me say the art versus the science. One of the things that I know now, I don't think this has happened as much recently, but for a long time. So I'm going to put in tri-level, multi. But there was a point in time where what agents would do is they would have listed this multi-level home as a 2-story because they thought more people will be interested in buying a 2-story than a multi-level. So they would list it wrong just to get people to see it. And in fact, actually, I know one agent, I don't know if he's still doing this, but this goes back probably 10 years ago, that I know one agent that if he went and listed a property that most of the homes had a 3-car garage and his listing that he was going to be doing only had a 2-car garage, he would put it on the MLS as having a 3-car garage so that people would pull it up in their search. Now, I do not recommend that you do that, meaning like don't false advertise what a property is. But I know this particular agent told me, oh, I still listed it as a 3-car garage because I want people to still go look at it. Okay, but I don't think you should intentionally do that. But
It's really frustrating.
yeah, it can be very frustrating.
Well, because I find out some previous listings when I'm going to list myself that when I call the city, they will tell me this is a 2-story or rambler or multi-level or whatever, and the previous actually listing was under
Something
tri-level.
different. Yeah. So just kind of keep in mind. So the reason I bring that up is if for whatever reason we put in tri-level, multi-level and we weren't having any comparables, I probably at that point would be saying, okay, let's try to add 2-story. And then I would go through and filter out the true 2-stories from ones that agents listed wrong. So, all right. So you can see I'm at 117, but I also remember we already talked, I don't want to go back a whole year. So I'm going to throw into the number of days back here. And again, I typically do like 120 days, but I may just, because I know what's going on in the market today, I'm going to say 90, which still might even be too far back, but that's okay. Let's just see what happens. So I put in 90 days. That's brought us down to 21 properties within that 1 mile radius. So the next thing that I do want to put in there is I'm going to say total square footage. So it was 1,800. So what do you guys think? If it's an 1,800 square feet, what should we do as a range?
1,600 to 2,000.
Okay, so I'm hearing basically do a 200 and heard it 2 different ways. And that's fine. So there's not a right answer. For me, here's how I typically do it, in fact. So it's 1,800. We'll say 1,600 on this side. And then again, this is personal preference, so don't like judge me, whatever. But I typically put 1999. Here's why. For the square footage, I'm putting in 1999, not 2,000. And the reason being that I'm doing that, which might not be right, but I'm just telling you in my own head what the logic is for me, I have just found a lot of times a buyer will say, we want at least 2,000 square feet, which our property wouldn't qualify for. So for me, I'm trying to live by me putting 1999, and there, if you just said I'm going to put 2,000 or you even put 2,100, totally fine. I'm just telling you what my logic is.
My logic. Be able to get more listings, more previous with the 1999 versus 2000. I do the same thing.
Yeah. Okay. So for me, I just am cutting it off because I'm kind of saying the buyer of a 2,000 square foot home, the buyer that says I want a minimum of 2,000 square feet probably isn't going to look at an 1,800. So I just want to eliminate those properties because I think they don't fit as much. So, okay. So based on that, we're now down to 11, which could be okay. We could say, all right, well, let's just go with that. I am going to throw in a year build. So our year build was 93. What should we put in as a range?
You go 5 years lower, 5 years high.
Okay, good.
I
So,
put 89 just for the heck of it.
okay.
Sometimes it's pretty close.
So Lourdes is saying 89. I'm hearing 5 years each direction. That's fine. Yeah. So here's how I typically think about it. And again, so I'm trying to tell you what goes through my head in terms of the art of this is the older the home, the bigger the age range that I put. The newer the home, the more I shrink up that age. Is just how I do it. Now, that could vary again, depending on location and stuff as well. But as a general rule, I would do that. So I like what Ginger said there. So for me, let's just throw that in here. We'll say 1988 to 19, I'm gonna just say 99, look at it, okay? So that goes a little higher on the other end, but again, my thinking being of somebody potentially saying, we want a home built in 2000 or newer. So, okay, let's see what that does. That gets us down to 8. All right, now, here's the other thing. So you guys may or may not have noticed, and I probably should have just opened a new tab to keep that other MLS up. But that home, the home that we're doing the CMA on, was a 3-bedroom, 1 bath on the upstairs. Would you guys, you give me your opinion, and then we'll see what the market says, but I'm just curious of what your opinions are. Would a 3-bedroom with 1 bath be the same value as a 3-bedroom with 2 baths, meaning the 2 bath upstairs, meaning one has a master bath and this one, the subject property we're looking at, had 1 bath that was shared for the 3 bedrooms upstairs?
3-bedroom, 2 bath.
Yeah, you had a hard time.
So what I'm hearing so far is you would say a 3-bedroom, 2 bath is going to be worth more than a 3-bedroom.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
typically, I would agree with you on that and say, yeah, I would say so too. So what I would potentially do then is come down into here and maybe on the levels here, put in the number of bathrooms, full baths, or even 3/4. But because we've only got 8, I'm not going to do that. If we had 30, I probably would do that. So I'm just going to do view results now. So that's, for me, that's enough information. We could have put in the acreage here as well. Like, to some extent, I guess think of it this way. I think of it as you have 2 different options when you're doing this. You can start really broad and narrow in, or you can start really narrow and expand out to find the property. But ideally, what I'm looking for is somewhere in the 3-4 properties that are going to be similar. Well, I've got 8 here. So I'm going to say, let's just view the results and take a look at these and make some decisions on it. So I'm just going to select all of these. And I usually start my search by doing the agent full report. But when I print it, I'm going to use the client full report. I'll tell you why in a second.
Is that what we should be sending people to?
Is what?
The
Client full. That's the one I like to use. So in fact, actually, I'll just talk about it right now. The reason I don't send the agent full, I used to send the agent full report, but I had gone to list a home. This was of a friend, and I had gone into their neighborhood and I printed off the agent full report and I sat down with them and I started going through it. And keep in mind, this was a friend. But at the end of me going over the properties, the friend says to me, you know, Russ, maybe we ought to list our house with, and then they just threw out this name that I was like, who's that? And I was like, what do you mean? What? You might list it with them. He said, well, of those sold properties that you showed us, and I think I'd shown him 4 of them, said that agent sold 2 out of the 4. Maybe we should just call them. And I was like, oh, glad this was a friend. And because if it was somebody you didn't know, they might have looked at that and been like, hey, let's call that guy before. So after that is when I always use the client full, because on the client full report, let me just show you. Yeah, it doesn't have their names, and it shows actually presented by, and it has your name on every one.
It's more official, more like you done the work.
So yeah, to answer your question, that's one. All right. So, but here's what we're going to do now. So what I want to do is, remember, we had the subject property is a 3-bedroom up with 1 bath. So this first property is a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. So initially, when we were having the home built, we were going to do it as a 2-bedroom, 1-bath because it's the same square footage, but it was 2 big bedrooms versus the 3 bedrooms kind of made the others a little bit small. So this one here, though, is a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. And holy cow. See, I regret doing this every time I do this because I should have not, I sold the property for like 160 or something. Real estate was meant to be bought, never sold. All right, anyway. Okay, so this one's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. Should I keep it as a comparable or no?
Let's just look at the other ones first.
Okay, good. That's the right answer, Slim. That's how I'm going to look at it. Is as at this point, if we can find 3 or 4 that are the exact same, I would rather use those. But if not, then I'm okay with this one because, like I said, it's either 2 big bedrooms or 3 that are others. And maybe we see that it doesn't really matter. But your build is about the same. Like the square footage is the same. Like everything's pretty close. For 421, that's crazy. All right. Here's one that's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. So this one's got the master. So here's why part of why I asked you guys is I wanted to see what we would find. What we just saw here, this one is closed February 12th for 420. This one is back to November. Did I not put in? Would that be within 9? I put in 90 days back, didn't I?
90 days would still be back into the late November.
Yeah, that's nuts. All right, so I probably am not going to use this one for 2 reasons. One is it's November, and the other being that it's got the master there. But, well, in fact, yeah, let's just get rid of it. All right, this one here is December. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, 361. Let's see what else we got here. This one's got a master bath at 370. This one's a 360, 3 bedrooms, 1 bath. This one's actually probably so far kind of our, I need my glasses, I can't see. This one is a better comparable, a little smaller home, but not much, newer too. And then 345. See, this is the challenge with this. So this is a tri-level, multi-level, but look, they put the square footage as if it's a Rambler.
Hey, Russ?
Yeah.
You haven't mentioned lot size yet. Lot size to me makes a big difference in buyers too, because sometimes they're looking for a little larger yard for personal reasons. They need RV parking or whatever. So it seems like lot size is also a big factor in people's choices.
Good point. So here, the reason I didn't on this one is and so thank you for bringing it up, because if our lot size was a 0.4 or 0.3 or something, I probably would have said, let's throw that in to make sure we're getting them. But just knowing the area, I know most of the lot sizes are going to be about the same. And so that's the only reason I did it. So,
and it does seem like in some areas, there's a lot that is bigger than everybody else's for some reason.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Sometimes in a cul-de-sac or something, you're right. So I will keep an eye on that as we scroll through it.
Yeah.
But probably what you're going to notice on these is they're all at 0.20, 0.18. They're all really close. So I wasn't too worried about that.
I got you.
So yeah, good point. All right. Here's another one with the master at a 340 in January. So here's what I would say, and I don't want to spend, for the sake of time, we're not going to do this on every property, but I do want to see, so this one here, let's look at, because it was January, let's look at the condition of this one and the one for 424.
Beautiful.
Eh.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like they've just taken the cabinets that were in there and stained them.
What's that?
What is?
What is that?
It's maybe
Right here?
Yeah.
I think it's wallpaper.
Oh, wallpaper.
Looks like a wallpaper to me.
See, they're still constructing something maybe.
Yeah, that looks like
plywood or
It looks
something.
like an unfinished keyboard.
All right. Okay, so now let's go back to this
It looks
424
pretty
one.
clean.
Yeah, that was clean. Let's see if this one's totally updated maybe.
This is much
Yeah,
better.
When they stay in cabinets, those are almost.
Wow.
This is
I would
nice.
stain them, I'd paint them like that.
Granite countertop.
I would not stain them at all.
Okay, now remember, we're saying ours is updated. We're saying that
Yeah, so this is good.
we're gonna assume
This is a nice.
that they updated.
Yeah.
Because they told us that we saw.
It also got more money than the rest of them too, so it makes sense.
That's
Okay,
definitely
So
much
here's
better.
the question then for you guys. So let me just kind of run through this again. So we've got here's a 421. Then we dropped to the 360. Then we went to a 370, 360, 345, 340, 340. If we were going to now, so here's what I would do is I would go through and select of these, the ones that I thought were the most similar, which I maybe would keep this one, probably would keep this one because of it being updated. I mean, we would probably want to look through all these. Like I said, we're not going to go through all of them, but let's at least kind of, I mean, yard doesn't look great, but
Somewhat updated.
somewhat, yeah.
Oh, the yellow killed it.
Whoa.
That is.
That baby, why they got 340 right there, right?
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Hey, wait a minute. I love yellow.
Right ago?
It's okay in some places.
Yeah.
That looks good on a Ferrari, and that's about it.
I'll buy it.
Or a Corvette.
Yeah.
I don't mind yellow Corvettes.
I'll fix it.
Okay, so here's the question for you guys, and I want everybody online, this is I'm giving you a word, but I'm not really giving you a word, but this is how you get to participate, so you get credit for this class. Which if you have not put your first and last name in there, and at least your license number once, make sure you do that. Especially if your name's showing wrong, like Carla. Make sure you put it in the chat box. Okay, here's what I want you to do. Everybody else, put in there based on what we've seen. What would you put as a recommended list price to our seller based on if we were to go out there? So now remember, if we were doing this the way an appraiser would do this, we're going to grab 3 properties, 3 of these. And so you can kind of decide which 3 you want to use. Let's see where this is at. So, because this one is like only 2 years newer. Not far away,
And
actually.
the most recent to sell, correct?
I think that is the most recent sale we've
So
had.
it kind of indicates a little bit where the market is posted months ago.
So, okay,
I'd be inclined to say right on there, if it's updated and it's similar. fashion.
put in the chat box, and you guys that are here with me in the room, you just get to commit out loud. What's your price?
I would be thinking 430.
Okay, so Swen's going 430. I'm seeing some on here at
Based off that
380, 415, 390, 399, 415, 390, 400.
if it's comparable and like quality of that.
Okay, what do you guys think? Ed, what-
I like 430.
430?
I do a little bit different.
That's fine.
This is what I do. Sometimes what I do, I pick my 304 and I kind of like the prices, I kind of like come out with a total and divide it for and they come out with this the big one.
So you
Okay.
take an average.
Okay. So what's your price? Give me a
What were
ball.
the numbers before?
So it was
340, 340.
340, 360,
But sold how much longer ago?
There's one with four
370,
something.
and then the 370. Bunch of these were December.
Oh,
And then,
December.
and then in February is a 421. There was one in January that was like 340, wasn't it?
So I'm gonna
Yeah,
change mine
that
to
was pretty
420.
low, but that was the yellow one.
That's what I was
Stick
thinking.
430.
Yeah.
Because I think the third bedroom really makes. a
Okay,
difference.
good.
Yeah.
All right, so now,
The increase of the property
Wasn't
on
that
fee is
missing a
about
bathroom, though?
5% every month.
okay,
No, that one had 2 and 1.
Oh, I only had 2 and 1. Oh, yeah, then 430. Yeah, I would say
Okay.
430 or something like that.
okay, good. All right, so that's, if we were doing this the way an appraiser would do it, so let me just kind of show you. And you could use this, you could come to here and do CMA report, and that will bring up this CMA report, and you can create your own adjustments and things in here to where you can, select from these unverified archive values, to where it's got all this in here. And then this is where I could populate the subject what Carla was saying, which would put in the information in here.
Can you go back real quick and show me how you got to this screen, Russ? I apologize. I'm sorry.
Yep, all I did was from here, is under the reports,
Yeah.
right here.
Gotcha.
You just click CMA report.
Gotcha.
And I should have kept the MLS number. We could have thrown it in here. In fact, well, let's do this. Let me go back and get it real fast.
This is pretty close to how I've been playing around with it so far. This is better and a little bit better, obviously. I have no idea what I'm doing.
I have no idea what I'm doing here. I'm just making.
So the things I've been struggling with are unique properties. Like I was wanting to practice on my friend's house. It's a multi-million-dollar house in a neighborhood that houses don't sell very often because they're freaking expensive.
I'll tell you how to do that.
It's like, how do I figure?
Let's do this first, and then I'll tell you how to do that. Okay, so here I've now populated it. So based upon this, using all of those properties, this is recommending a 371. Okay, now I'm going to go back though, because I personally don't like to take this report. Again, it's just personal preference. I would prefer to show up with these handed to them, printed out as the client full report, and go through it and point out to them, okay, your house is updated, this house is updated. Your house has 3 bedrooms, this has 2, but they're 2 big bedrooms. And, you know, I'm going to go through and just point out the differences between the two. And then you'd come down here and go, this one's a 2-bedroom, 1 bath, but it's not as updated, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to go to this one and say, this one's got a master bath and yours doesn't, which could make this one more appealing, but yours is updated and this one's not, which makes yours more appealing. So like, that's kind of how I'm going to go through and do that. Okay. So what we have done essentially is how an appraiser is going to go about doing it. And you could go spend the time doing adjustments and yada, 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 right? What's the problem with that? Or is there a problem? Maybe there's not, but you probably can assume that I'm assuming there is, or I wouldn't ask the question. What's the problem? What do we not know?
We don't know other outside sources that may reflect the value. Like, is there a dump nearby?
Okay, good. Yeah, so Swen brings up a good point that could factor into it. And let me tell you actually a quick story on that. So I used to do a lot of bank foreclosures. So the banks would call me and say, hey, I need you to help us sell this property. Well, as part of that, I had developed a relationship with the bank to where that sometimes they would tell me what they were going to list the property for. And I would say, if you're going to list it at that price, I want to buy it. And the bank would say, okay. And they would, so before we even listed it, they would just sell me the property. So I had one that was downtown, kind of in the 9th and 9th area that was on McClellan Street. And we actually, on that one, actually, I take that back. This one was a little different. This one we had listed. But when I had gone through the property, I had not gone down I kind of went down in the basement, but I didn't really like go in the basement. I kind of just went down there and glanced around. Well, we got a buyer that came through on it that when they did their inspection, came back and said, there's been a fire in the basement. And so they wanted this huge price reduction from the bank. The bank just said, nope, sorry, cancel if you don't want to buy it. So they did. Well, the bank didn't have me go check it out. So I go look at it and I sent them pictures to show them, yeah, there is, you can see one of the floor joists had been burned. And so they did kind of whatever they did internally and came back and said, we're going to sell it at this price. Well, in the meantime of that, I had called up a friend that was a contractor and I said, hey, can you come and take a look at this? And ultimately what I was wanting to find out, because it looked to me like maybe it was some kids messing around and the beam had caught on fire, and that before it got too out of hand, they hurried and blew it out or threw some water on it. Like it was almost like some kids ran upstairs, got a cup of water or something, threw it on it, maybe even had one there. But the beam was burned, but it wasn't, and as my friend came out and looked at it, he was like, structurally, it's totally fine. But here's kind of what I would do to fix it and to make sure that it still keeps its structural integrity. Okay. But in the meantime, the bank came back and said, okay, based on our policies, because there was a fire, this is the price we'll sell it for. Well, when they said that, I said, well, I'll buy it if you're going to sell it for that price. You know, I've looked into this. This isn't a big deal. I'll buy it. You shouldn't have said that. I know. They said, okay, yeah, if you want to buy it, go for it, buy it. So we canceled the listing and I bought the property. So I went through, we rehabbed it, got it all ready to sell. And when I listed it, and I wish I could remember the numbers, but when I listed it, in the meantime of us fixing it up, I noticed, man, there was a few that had sold for a lot higher than I thought. And so I thought, man, we might make even a lot more money. So we listed it this much higher than I initially planned to. And even when I listed it, I all of a sudden got a ton of showings. And I was like, wow, this can even sell maybe for more because of the number of showings that I got. Well, what ended up happening though is all these people would show it and I never got any offers. Like 1 week goes by and I had, I don't know, 20 or 30 showings, no offers. The next week went by, I had another 20 or 30 showings, no offers. And I was like, what is going on? And I would call and people, yeah, they just didn't really like it, whatever. So I was kind of, how can you not like it? We had totally updated it. Well, I went out to the house the one day, and I don't remember why I was there, but I was standing there looking at it saying, okay, I've got to look at this through the eyes of a buyer. And so when I went out to my car and I got in the car and I was like, okay, I'm going to just pretend I'm a buyer that just drove up. So I get out of the car and I'm standing there looking at the property and I'm like, okay, I don't see anything that would be a turn off from that. So I go walking into the house and I'm walking around looking inside the house and I'm looking at it and I'm like, we did a quality work, they made it look good. I don't understand. Well, luckily we didn't have any blinds or anything on the windows. And so I'm standing in the living room and I'm looking out and it had, for you guys that are familiar with this 6th floor training room, like it had 2 windows that were not quite like what this is, but they were probably the size of two of these windows. So there was 2 windows that were the size of like 4 of these. Nice picture window. Yeah, that I was like, that's great. Like the windows are awesome. And then I look and I realize, no, looking out across the street, there's a power plant right across the street. And I was like, oh.
Good blind.
That was the problem. Is I was like, if I probably had blinds in there, probably would have made a difference. But so what you said, Swen, is right on. There are other things, what's next door or across the street or behind it, that potentially could be affecting the value of the property. And the property should have sold if it didn't have that power plant right across. But your view looking out the window was power plant. So
Location, yeah.
yeah, and I guess not power plant, but power substation or whatever. So anyway, so yeah, that plays into it as well. Okay, so that's good, but there's still more. What do we not know? What have we not taken into account that may change what you guys are saying in terms of the value?
Houses currently for sale.
Okay, good, thank you. All right, so but before we even do that, let's do this. Let's see what's under contract. Because see, now remember I said, here's where I think this piece that we're going to talk about now is I think what separates us. Because typically an appraiser is going to be looking at this. Now, here's the interesting thing. Imagine though, if you were doing this, if we had done this a week ago, or a week and a day ago, before the 12th of, a week ago would have been only the 10th, right? We would not have had, here's what's interesting. Had we done this class a week ago, you would have not had that comp to look at. You guys would have only had those. Your values would have been totally different a week ago.
Yeah.
A week ago, you guys would have been telling me 360,
Yeah.
something like that, probably, is my guess.
Because we got to physically view a house that sold in similar situation.
Yeah. So here's my point. If we could go back, rewind a week ago, this would have been showing as an under contract, not a sold. And so if you were an appraiser, you wouldn't have taken that into consideration. So to some extent, it makes me wonder, how did the appraiser justify 420 when the highest we had down here was like 370 or something, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a 370.
But as an agent, don't you normally take into account under contract?
Yeah, you
It
should.
looks like it's a very positive sign.
Yeah, you should, for sure. And that's kind of my point, is that's why I say I think we are more in touch with the current market. An appraiser does a great job of telling you what happened before, but we're dealing for a buyer now, not one a month ago or 2 months ago or 3 months ago, right? So, okay. So let's see if this changes, you guys. Like, I kind of wish we had done this a week ago to where that wasn't there, because you guys would have told me all 360 is your price right now. And then I would have pulled up the under contracts and you would have totally changed. But let's see what happens. Okay, so I'm going to use all the same information. We're just going to change it from being sold to I want to see backup and under contract. Okay. So there's two. So now let's see what those look like.
Still pretty cheap. Compared to that one.
All right. Let's see.
What was so special about that?
Yeah, to some extent, it does make you wonder a little bit, right? Of like, huh. So here's a 375. Now, part of it, what you got to remember is that when this property listed back on February 8th, that one hadn't closed. So every agent was only going off those other 360, 370.
I also noticed that on all these we've looked at, the days on market was like 1, 2, this one's 5. That one that sold for more was 57 days.
Oh, was it?
They priced it higher and then waited for the right offer.
Let me go back on that. I want to look at that. Thank you. Let's see what they did.
Yeah, good thing.
Let's look at the history on it. So yeah, they listed it at 424, reduced it to 414. December 22nd, got an offer on January 15th.
Yeah, but if you did that CMA comparison report that you did before,
Yeah.
It gives you the days on market of the 3 properties that you were looking at.
Yeah.
The other 2 were like 1 and 2. This one was 57. The other one we were just looking at was 5. So yeah, these guys took a little longer to sell, but they got $40,000 more at it.
Yep. So here's the risk though, is that sometimes what you don't want to interpret that as is that you could go higher, and if you're willing to wait 2 months that it might sell. I think the other thing that played into that, Chad, is that if you look at the dates of that, it was right around Christmas time.
Yeah.
So I mean, who knows? Yeah.
So the other branches might have been underpriced a little because they sold so quickly.
Yeah, possible. All right, so let's take a look here back at these. So this one's at 375 under contract, was 5 days on the market. Let's see, my internet's being kind of slow, and I actually just realized my battery's about to die. Even though I'm plugged in, for some reason it's not charging.
What I noticed too, the exterior finishes, actually they give some more value too on the houses versus stucco and siding.
Yeah, it's possible. All right, hang on one sec, sorry. I gotta see. For some reason, my battery's not wanting to charge.
Apple products.
So if for some reason, actually, I think it might be this thing. Because I don't have a problem charging it with this at home. But I know this cord's working because the TV's on.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we got 24% battery to finish this up. So if all of a sudden you guys disappear, you'll know what happened. All right. Actually, you won't, because we still got this going. All right. I just wanted to look at this real quick, the pictures here, just to see. So not updated.
I mean, at least it's clean.
Yeah, it's
Clean,
clean, but not
carpet wasn't
updated.
red and weird.
Same with this, not updated. Okay. Does this change your
Yeah.
your opinion of value?
Yes.
What are you thinking?
Usually not.
Because to bring it to that other one, you're gonna spend quite a bit of money.
Okay.
If you're gonna do quality work, if you're gonna do IKEA, you can do it for.
So what's your recommended list price now?
Based off these two. Another one.
Well, yeah, I
So
was
one
gonna
of
say-
the bedrooms, the bath square footage is similar. Well, it's actually 200 square feet
A
smaller.
little smaller,
The 420.
a little smaller.
They're both about 200 square feet smaller, and the first one has only 2 bedrooms.
Okay, so maybe not 430, maybe 415.
Okay. Anybody changing their
375.
opinion?
No, I'm gonna
400.
399.
400 and let them fight for it.
Okay.
410.
All right. What else do we need to look at? We still got to look at what's active. Okay. So
Yeah.
let's see what happens here. None. So there's 0 actives.
So if you want to live in that market, maybe leaving it at 430 would even be better. Because if you want to live in that area, there's nothing there.
Yeah, there is nothing for sale right
Give
now.
the home more value.
So here's what I'm seeing from this. As soon as my battery dies, I'm gonna go door knock that neighborhood and show everybody the 420. Just kidding. All right. So but typically what I would be doing, guys, is I would want to be looking back on these actives to see, okay, what's the competition saying to us? And at this point, there is no competition. So supply and demand would say what?
You're in a good condition. You're in a good situation.
That's high value. You know.
Yeah. So what's the downside though to us going at a 420 or 4, whatever you guys are saying?
You'll have a hard time getting an appraisal at that number.
So maybe, I mean, the one thing that we've got going for us is we should have an easier time than,
Or at least wait for another month.
yeah, we should have an easier time getting it than this one. The other thing that will play into it is those 2 that are under contract could potentially be selling. I mean, if you guys know what's going on in the market today, and we've got these 2, let me go back to
Yeah, their final sold price. But we come on to see if they're under contract, right?
Yep.
You can't see what their sell price
Correct.
is.
So what would you guess the offers are for on these 2 properties?
10 to 15 over.
Yep, I'd say 10 or 15 over as well.
Yeah, so it's probably very likely that they're close to the one, I guess, 375, possible that one's in the 390. And so I think because we have the one sold for 424, you got a better chance of an appraisal coming in, but so anyway, what questions, things you guys have?
I just have a comment.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go to that house that we're talking about, the property that we were wanting to sell, if the roof was recently replaced, that's a good thing. If the water heater and the furnace is new, I mean, there's some really nice things that people feel like they're getting a brand new home with almost. And if it's in the right location for schools, if it's in the right location for work, people are looking for something that's going to be convenient. And if they've got the money, they're usually willing to do it, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's all those amenities, right? There's all those little things that don't have a price tag on them that people are willing to pay for.
So here's the one thing, and so I'm going to show you, well, actually first, any other questions or comments before I go on to what I was going to do next?
I just think these properties look much better than the subject property though too, so.
Now you got to remember though that the subject property, though, what we looked at it was back in 2012, and we are assuming that they've gone and updated it. So we're not.
Yep, that's true.
We verified it.
That's right.
It's
Remember,
beautiful.
Ed made me drive out there and verify.
Well, that's the way to go. No more red carpet or anything like that. It looks
Yeah,
good.
nope, it's all new carpet, new paint, updated cabinets, stuff, yep, appliances.
I remember having turquoise.
All right, somebody else had on Zoom had a comment.
Hey, Russ, I had a question. It's maybe a little off topic, but the other day you mentioned something about a property being worth something to somebody because they can have horses on it. I'll probably be listing a property in April, and I know that horses are allowed. I'm just wondering to what extent that affects the value, the ability to own horses.
Yeah, good. So yes, it's going to affect the value. As far as how much, that's going to depend on where it's at and all those things. So here's what I would do. If I were you, how I would do it is that would be a perfect example of when I'm doing my search on here, I'm probably going to do a much bigger area than just I mean, I may start it at a mile, but depending on where the property is and how many, I'm going to do my search though. I may do a much bigger area, which I'll come back to that in a second. But what I am going to do is put in down here under the amenities and stuff is I'm going to select horse property. And you're also going to probably, that's where when Ed was asking about relying on the acreage, I'm going to because the one you're listing, how much acreage does it have?
It's actually 2 lots totaling 2 acres.
Okay. So essentially though, I would want to be looking at, and is it subdivided as 2 different lots?
I believe so.
Okay. So basically what I would be doing there is I would want to be doing the CMA looking for 1 acre properties, which you're probably going to have to do a bigger area. I mean, again, depending on where it's at. Where's the location of the property?
It's Tooele.
Okay. So, and so I would probably include Grantsville in that potentially as well, though. So I may use like Tooele County, but then putting in the acreage of being 1 acre to 2 or 1, somewhere in that range at least. But the idea being, I want to be comparing with properties that are also horse properties, because it's for for horses, very likely, especially when you're getting on the 1 acre side of things, that the person who has the horses is going to be knowing, I got to find a property that's zoned for that. And they also know it's probably going to cost them more money. So I want to be comparing it to similar properties that have the same thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And then is the appraiser going to take that into consideration?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Good. So let's go to, I'm going to do 2 other things real quick, and hopefully, let me see battery wise. I'm at 20% now. So talk fast. Yeah. If we lose you guys on Zoom, you'll know what happened. I don't know why it's not charging, because this cord works just fine at home. Anyway, all right.
Do you think you need to flip the light on? maybe?
No,
because it's getting power.
It's got power for
TV is
this.
working.
Yeah. Okay, so Swen had brought up, what about property that's unique? So similar to what I just said, is we're gonna have to try to do a search, seeing if, problem is, I don't know if that's long enough. Is it?
No, it probably won't be long enough, but are you able to move this closer to you?
Oh, yeah, she does it.
I mean, I can give you their address, I have it memorized, and it's like, oof, trying to deal with that, trying to figure out how to you would do it is like impossible for me so far.
Oh, this is not working, because this is for phone. So that won't, you don't know, but let me try just the, oh, that's not gonna let you.
What's wrong with you?
All right, we won't worry about it. It'll be fine. We're just, no, it's a USB-C.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, sorry, guys. Now I'm just wasting valuable time. All right. Whoa, we just got a spark. Oh, but it started to charge. There we go. Okay, don't move. Okay, so typically you're gonna have to try to find as close to that as you can. But the challenge is, there are gonna be times when you cannot find comparables. You're gonna have scenarios that there are just no comparables out there. You have nothing to go off of in terms of finding the comparables.
Yeah, because there are 5 years ago, you know, when I looked up, I'm like, oh my gosh, nothing sold in that area at all.
Okay, so it sounds like it just in the area, it's not, the property's not as unique as much as just there hasn't been sold in the area.
It's pretty stable. Unique because it's huge, like let's say it's 10,000 square feet. It's above the Capitol, and a beautiful, you know, it's got 2 acres or something like that.
Okay.
Just, yeah, it's hard.
So this is that same type of a scenario. If when you get to that, what's the square footage you say?
10,000 square
Okay,
feet.
so I'm gonna look for other 10,000 square foot homes throughout the valley then, which, and to some extent, like you say, what's it gonna be worth? But here's the thing. At the end of the day, you're gonna have sometimes where what happens is there's nothing. And when that happens, you kind of have to just trust in the market. And what I mean by that is you cannot underprice a property as long as you will let it be on the market for a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah.
If it's on the market for a reasonable amount of time, and when I say that, in today's market, you know, a few days is probably a reasonable amount of time. But there's sometimes you just have to say, okay, we're going to put it on and see what happens. As long as you give it, in my opinion, it's 72 hours. If you will at least give it 72 hours, if you're underpriced, you will get enough offers that drive the price up to where it should be. If you're overpriced, then what's going to happen is the main thing you're going to do on some of those is you may have to just tell the seller, here's the best guess. And I've even sat down with them on the MLS to show them there's no homes that have sold similar to yours. Or if the property itself is very unique, they already know that. And so there's not going to be a problem in saying, you know, this is a unique property, that there's not others out there like that. Based upon that, we're just going to have to pick a price. I sometimes say, we'll just have to throw a dart and whatever price it hits, let's start at that price. But here's what we do know. If a property sits on the market for a reasonable amount of time, and typically I say 3 weeks, but for that, a 10,000 square foot property, I might say if that one sits on the market for 3 months and we haven't received an offer, that is the market's way of telling you it's overpriced. And so we just have to adjust, and we need to adjust it down minimum of 5% every time. And we just have to keep doing that until we get it to where a buyer goes, okay, I'll pay that price. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
And Russ?
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe I missed it, but don't multi-million-dollar homes have a whole new strategy with them? In other words, if someone can afford to buy that kind of home, their lifestyle, their, means of making a living, where it is location wise, the scenery.
Yeah.
I mean, they're a special market that you almost have to see the willingness of that market to pay that much for a property of this, level.
Sure. Yeah, but at the end of the day, I would say it still doesn't change that if you have it on for a reasonable amount of time, and the reason I say it is reasonable again is if we were talking a $29-30 million home in Utah, that reasonable amount of time might be a year.
A year, exactly.
Before you adjust. But
Right.
but yeah, it doesn't change that you're going to follow a pricing strategy of we're going to decide if it's not sold by X, that is the market's way of telling you.
Yeah.
So the other thing that can play into it, I think I mentioned in one of the classes about a cabin that I sold up Big Cottonwood. One of the things that I noticed, and so this is the next piece, this is kind of the last thing I wanted to hit on, is sometimes in doing a CMA, you want to pay attention to what are the similar characteristics that are going on the properties. And what I mean by that is typically these properties that we just were looking at, if you go back a year ago, every one of them selling had the seller paying the buyer's closing costs. Well, if you know that, if you see that as you go through this, so let me go back to the sold here. If as part of your CMA, you noticed on here, which we're not going to have on any of these because of what's going on in the market today. But if you had noticed, and in fact, actually, I'm going to do it this way. Watch this. I'm going to go back to sold and I'm going to put in about a 90-day range. So I'll just do November of 2019 to February.
That's under price reduction, Russ. Is that where you want it?
Oh, thank you. No. Good catch. Thank you.
I can't even see that from right here. Barely.
So if, I'm just going to go back to last year on this. So there were 10 properties that sold from November 1st to February 12th last year. So if we look those properties up, my guess would be that we're going to see on here that most of them are probably paying closing costs. Yeah, $7,800 in concessions, $3,500 in concessions, $500 in concessions, $6,000 in concessions, $5,000 in concessions. So part of what I'm saying is if a year ago, if I was listing this property, one of the things I would have been telling you guys, and I would be telling the seller is you're gonna pay closing costs. I mean, look at this. And somewhere between, $5,000-6,000. Let's just offer to pay $5,000 in closing costs as part of our marketing. Let's just put it on, like every single one of these a year ago was paying closing costs for the buyer. Well, if we know that, then let's market it that way. Because even though others are going to do it, like we saw it, but I guarantee you a year ago, none of these properties were advertised as seller will pay $5,000 towards buyer's closing costs. I mean, why not just already advertise it that way to attract the buyer to be like, well, hey, they're already willing to pay our closing costs. And yes, agents, we might know, oh, well, every seller is going to have to do that during that market. But the buyers don't know that. So why not advertise it that way as to, we'll pay yours for you. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right. So that's the other thing that I would say is part of what we want to pay attention to is, are there some consistencies that we're seeing in this? Let me give you some others that potentially could play into it. Sometimes there are some areas that the people moving into that area always come from a surrounding or a certain neighborhood. Well, if you know that as well, then you could actually target things that way. You could go door knock the neighborhood surrounding a particular neighborhood. Hey, the home just came up for sale over here. So part of, I guess, what I'm saying is as you're doing a CMA, don't get into just the same old routine of just, well, this, what we did there, here's the solds, and go with that. Instead, sometimes really look at the properties to see, are there some consistencies on this? Now, where the people are coming from is going to have to be something that you would catch, like at a listing appointment, of the seller just saying, yeah, almost everybody that moves into this area tends to move from just, the neighboring neighborhood or something. Like if it's kind of a step up neighborhood. So also kind of pay attention to those type of things on it as well. And look for the same type of the closing cost type of things. Are there some similarities of things that are going on? Now, the other thing that I would do for me, and this because of what's going on in the market today, so I'm going to go back to the actives. We'll wrap up on this here. So give me just 5 or 10 minutes and we'll be done. So I'm going to go back to the actives, all the same information we had in there, but I'm going to go to the view map. And instead of having this area right here, I'm going to exit out. I'm going to clear that out. And I'm going to widen this a little bit. Because what I'm going to say is a buyer buying in this area, which it was right here is where it is, they're not going to only limit themselves. The person who's going to buy this property is probably not limiting themselves to only looking for homes for sale right here. That makes sense? So to some extent, we're kind of guessing on this, but I'm just going to say, let's go from 5400 South here over to Mountain View Corridor, go down Mountain View to like 70th and back over to Bangalore here. And let's see what we get here, if anything. There still may be none. There's one in that area. Well, let's at least see. So here's our competition, and it's a 379, 6 days on the market. So to some extent, probably in this scenario, I would call this Jennifer and just say, hey, this is Russ with Century 21. I'm about to list a property similar to the one you have listed. Are you in negotiations on offers? What's going on with, I would just at least kind of want to get a feel for the area. Yeah, what's going on? Because it's possible that if she's getting no off, we were thinking, some of you guys were thinking 420, 430, whatever. But if it's 379, now granted, we'd want to look at this to see what, might not be updated. But here's the other thing. No, to some extent, I usually use this property every time I teach this class. I have seen scenarios where the ones that are updated actually are not selling, and the ones that are not updated are the houses that are selling. So that could be a downside of the fact that it is updated. That's the kind of thing, I guess, that I'm saying, keep an eye when you're doing your CMA of the art side of it, not the science, meaning if you're noticing, at one point, like I said, I did the CMAs on this, and I said, let's assume it was updated. At one point of us doing this in this class, we came to the determination of, as the seller, you shouldn't have updated, because the updated houses were not selling for any more than the non-updated. So anyway, that's what I would say is the other thing that in today's market I would be doing is I might even come back here to this map and say, all right, let's go a little even further than that out to see, based on year built and stuff, if we can find any other ones. So let's go like 47th here. And actually, I'll even go out here a bit, go down to 78th and over. Oh, why is it not clicking? Come on, there we go. Still only one. That's crazy. So based on that, maybe we do try it at 430. Because you got one house in that whole area that's similar. That's what we've put in. So all right. What questions?
What would you have with that?
Be honest, I'm scared. To me, I feel like 424 is too high.
400.
415 will be great.
Yeah, I probably would. And for me, based on seeing that, without the 424, I would have said, let's do 375 and know it'll get driven up. Seeing the 424, I probably would be comfortable saying, let's list it at 4. But
Well, when I went and looked at the property, it had all new windows, brand new roof, new utilities of everything,
right,
and the lawn was great, automatic sprinkler system. The area was terrific.
Okay,
Ready
so,
to sell it.
so you're doing it 430.
I'm going all.
So what was your guess, Russ?
I just said I probably would be most comfortable around the 4, but I'm even a little, like if the seller wanted to do 4, I would probably do it. Truthfully, for me, guys, honestly, and I don't know for sure. I mean, we're kind of making this up, but I almost don't know if I would even, sometimes if I see an outlier property like what we had, I probably would take that comp out because, and go with the 379 and
Maybe
maybe
the
even
terms
said
where
to them,
somebody was cash and sort of this might skew everything.
could be, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. The only reason I would probably have left that one in is because we went with the assumption that, like what Ed said, new windows, it's all totally updated, everything's done. Then I might go do it.
It's got solar panels.
Here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to watch, and the next one that goes, if one of those other under contracts is over 4, I'm going to hurry and go out and door knock and see if I can buy one for 350. Turn around and sell for 450. I'm kidding. All right. Yeah, go ahead.
Lourdes and I have a personal story. When we bought our first home, we bought it for $53,000.
Okay.
Okay, small 1,800 square foot home. We made it great. We sold it for 110.
Okay.
Okay, but the rest of the homes in that area, no one was really selling much. And I thought she was really out of the market with 110.
Yeah.
We sold it in what? In a week. And there was nothing else going on, and I thought we were way overpriced. But then what we saw, other homes coming in on the market, they were in the upper range too, over 100,000. We felt kind of like, hey, we started.
You were the
ball,
trailblazers,
you know?
yeah.
Yeah, and it was the market took it. So
Sometimes I'm thinking when, some realtors are a little bit afraid, they don't just followers. Sometimes I like to be able to be a leader. You need to just go ahead and show up on that price, and other realtors will be able to support you. And that helps actually to be able to get the market over.
Yeah, here's the thing. I would say, guys, to some extent, wouldn't be a bad idea. I mean, maybe you don't want to do it today with the weather, but to some extent, it may be worth going out into that area, knocking on doors. I would almost say, wait for one of these other under contracts to see if it's around 4. Could be worth knocking on doors, telling people, hey, your house is probably worth 400,000. If you want to sell it, go buy something else.
What's the
coordinates?
It was 6,200 south and 5,600 west. All right, guys.
You look like a super agent if you did it today, though.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, okay, so for you guys online, if you have not put your name and stuff in the chat box, do so, and at least have your license number one of the times too. Otherwise, thanks for being here. So Friday, so a reminder that it will be Friday that we will do the buyer packet. So very similar to what we did with last week on the seller side, but we're going to just go through how do you fill out the buyer paperwork, make sure you guys are good with that, and then that'll be it. So,
Thank you, Russ.
see you guys on Friday.
Thanks, Russ.
Thanks, Russ.
Yep. Yeah.
Thank you, Russ.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Oh, I think it's beautiful. I haven't seen like this in
Yeah, I wonder what's up with this. It's almost like this.
That's the
I don't know
fact
if
that I
it's
think.
this thing,
probably just the box part.
except for that it works at my house fine.
Oh, wow.
So I don't understand. Because it wasn't working there. It's not working on this. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, the road was great. Now it looks like just right.
Russ, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you record this session?
Yes.
Is there any way that you can send it to me? I just want to go over again.
Yeah. If you, I'll just tell you where it's at, because it won't show up there till probably later today. But if
I'm sorry, I can barely hear you.
you go to YouTube, in fact, actually, I'll pull up this.
Let me send you my email. Let me just talk to you by email.
Yeah, send me an email and I'll get it.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Everybody, huh?